Hi, welcome to Apologetics moment number 2. In this episode, we're going to be discussing worldviews. Now, a worldview is a network of presuppositions which determine how we interpret all of our experiences. Now, a presupposition is something that we presuppose as true before we can reason or think about anything. And it's important that we understand that everybody has a worldview. And a worldview is basically the lens through which we view the world, hence why we call it a worldview. Now, people will often use emotional or evidential reasoning in order to support and justify their beliefs or justify their worldview. The problem with this, however, is that people will always reinterpret the evidence in order to defend their most basic presuppositions and to defend their worldview instead of sacrificing their worldview. People will often use what's known as a rescuing device in order to rescue their worldview when faced with evidence that seems to contradict it. For example, Christians will often use the argument from design in order to prove that God exists. People will say that, the universe appears to be designed, it's very finely tuned, and they'll use this as evidence that God exists and that he has finely tuned and created and designed the universe. Now, don't get me wrong, I believe that this is a very good argument. It's a very strong argument for the God of the Bible. However, people will always reinterpret that evidence based on their worldview, and atheists will simply say, yes, the universe does look designed, it is finely tuned, but that's only because we live in one of many universes. We actually live in what's known as a multiverse, and we just got very lucky. Now, many of you had probably had conversations just like this, and they can be really frustrating and actually pretty fruitless. You end up just throwing evidence at one another, just hoping that something will stick, and neither one of you can see the argument from your opponent's perspective, not realizing that both of you have completely different worldviews, and you're both interpreting the same evidence using a different worldview. Therefore, you're coming to different conclusions about that evidence. This shows the necessity of understanding worldviews and understanding that this is how people interpret the world around them. We don't want to end up putting God on trial and arguing for the probability of God's existence. Instead, we will be exposing the unbeliever's worldview and showing him that only the Christian worldview can justify our most basic presuppositions about the realities of our existence. Ultimately, all non-believers' arguments have to steal from the Christian worldview in order to argue against it. And it's our duty to expose the fallacies and contradictions of their worldviews.